My name is Charlotte. I'm 34 years old and live in the suburbs of Bellevue, Washington. I work in tech as a senior manager, making a six-figure salary, and after nearly a decade grinding through contracts, I finally bought my first home. What I never expected was that the ones trying to take it away would be my own family. I still remember sitting in the lawyer's office that afternoon. My hands trembled with anger, but my eyes were cold as steel. In front of me was a stack of property transfer papers. My name was signed at the bottom, but I had never held a pen to sign anything. The lawyer glanced at me, voice steady. They used a forged signature. They thought you'd never notice. I let out a thin smile, drained of emotion. They thought wrong. I've been preparing for this for a long time. The story you're about to hear isn't just about a house. It's about betrayal. About a daughter who gave everything for her family, only to be treated like their cash machine, and about how she turned the whole game upside down with the last thing they expected, intelligence and patience. Have you ever been used by those you loved, made to feel like an outsider in your own home? If so, leave a comment below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because my dramatic story has only just begun. I grew up in a three-bedroom house in Spokane, where every word of praise always went to one person, Ryan. Ryan is my younger brother, 4 years behind me, but in my parents' eyes, he was always the center, the last great hope of the family. Every messy drawing Ryan scribbled was carefully framed and hung in the living room. Meanwhile, my report cards full of straight A's were tucked in a drawer so we don't brag. I didn't blame Ryan, at least not when we were little. When he was chosen to be the church's Christmas messenger while I stayed home to help bake, I simply thought, he's younger, he needs the attention. But as Ryan grew, the pattern never stopped. I earned a full scholarship to college, graduated with honors, and paid for grad school myself with 2 part-time jobs and a mountain of student loans. Ryan? After 3.5 years of changing majors, he dropped out. My parents still called it a step back before a big leap. And from then on, Ryan began his startups by spending other people's money. My father, Richard, was once a civil engineer. Now retired, he still speaks in precise tones, as if reading blueprints aloud. My mother, Elaine, a retired elementary school teacher, has a gentle voice she always used to cover an unyielding firmness. Somehow, both of them still believed Ryan was on the right track, just waiting for a little luck. I sat between them at Sunday dinner in the old house. The family photos on the wall had never changed, Ryan beaming, me serious. The food hadn't either, roast meat, mashed potatoes, apple pie. The warmth had long since drained away. Ryan's considering redoing his application for a management position at a new real estate firm in Tacoma, my mother said brightly, as though she'd just heard he'd won the lottery. Did you apply yet? I asked, eyes fixed on my glass of water. Not exactly, Ryan shrugged. But I'm researching carefully. Timing is everything. I almost laughed. He'd said the same thing 3 months ago when he wanted to be a gaming store manager. Before that, it was starting a YouTube channel teaching investing even though he had never invested a dime. My father set his knife down. You should support Ryan a little more, Charlotte. Your brother's trying. I looked up. How? By living with Mom and eating breakfast at noon every day. Don't be so harsh, my mother interjected. Ryan's just in a transition phase. You've faced hardships too, haven't you? I pushed the last piece of vegetable onto my plate. Not the same. I worked 2 jobs to survive, not to wait for someone to save me. Ryan chuckled. Here we go, the hardship to success speech. She forgets Mom and Dad helped her through college. I turned to him. $600 a semester, Ryan, for books. Everything else I covered myself. My mother set her glass down a little too hard. We did our best, Charlotte. I never said you didn't try. I'm only pointing out that I never had the privileges Ryan did. My father sighed. You always drag up the past. Can't you just look forward? I went silent. Dinner ended in a long stretch of quiet. Nobody looked at me. Nobody asked about my new project lead role, even though I'd just been handed an international team. I stood to clear the plates. My mother stopped me. Leave them. Sit and talk with your brother a little longer. I looked at her, no longer searching for recognition the way I once did. I think I should go. I have a meeting at 7 a.m. Tomorrow. Ryan smirked. She's too busy. Rich folks are always like that. I turned to him, meeting his eyes. You're wrong, Ryan. People like you only think others are rich when they stop giving you money. The room turned icy. My father rose, eyes heavy. Charlotte, if you can't keep peace in this house, then maybe you shouldn't come back at all. I let out a faint smile, not bitter, just like a sigh I'd held too long. All right then, I said. I'll remember that. I put on my coat and walked out of the house that raised me, where love always came with conditions and care always followed blame. The Seattle night air slipped into my collar as I opened my car door. On the passenger seat lay the folder, the documents for the house I'd just bought, and a plan no one in that house would ever see coming. Because love doesn't mean surrender, and sometimes staying silent too long is exactly what makes people think they have the right to decide for you. I moved into the Bellevue house on a drizzly Saturday morning. The sky was gray, the air carried the smell of damp earth, and a hint of fresh paint lingered around the doorframe. I stood at the entrance, keys in hand, my palms slick with sweat, though it was only about 50 degrees outside. I had waited for that moment too long. 6 years of relentless work, presentations stretching until 9 p.m., hundreds of unpaid hours for projects later scrapped, and too many meetings where male colleagues talked over me just because I was a woman. All of it condensed into that key, the key to independence. The house wasn't big, but it had natural light streaming in, walnut floors, and an open kitchen looking out over a small garden. I chose it because it tucked quietly on a calm street, where the wind through the maples sounded like the soft breathing of peace. I arranged every piece of furniture myself. A charcoal sofa, an oak dining table, floating bookshelves stacked with novels I hadn't had time to read. On the living room wall, I hung a painting my mother had done when she was young, partly because it was beautiful, partly because I wanted to keep some shred of good memory of her, though they were few. That first week, I invited no one. Not out of pride, but because I wanted to hear my own breath, the growl of the coffee machine in the early morning, the soft scuff of slippers against wood floors. I needed to be sure this space truly belonged to me. By the second week, my mother called. Can your father and I drop by this afternoon? We haven't really congratulated you yet. I hesitated. I hadn't told them much about the purchase, just a quick email with some photos. But I said yes, trying to keep my voice light. Of course, Mom. 4 o'clock. That afternoon, they arrived with apple pie and 2 bottles of wine. My mother walked in as if inspecting a rental after years left vacant. Her eyes swept each corner, nodding, then pausing at the kitchen. Window. Nice view. Though the walls are too light, stains will show easily. I smiled, saying nothing. My father stayed quiet most of the time, offering only brief remarks about lighting and space optimization. Then, over tea, my mother suddenly turned. Do you plan to open a room for your brother? I mean, when Ryan gets serious with a girlfriend and settles down, he'll need a place. I set my cup down. What did you just say? Well, this house is a bit big for just you, I thought. If you're not using the spare room, Ryan could stay here for a while. I let out a small laugh, tinged with bitterness. You think this house is for Ryan? She pulled back slightly. I'm only thinking ahead. We've told Aunt Mary that you were preparing this place for Ryan to use when needed. She admires your sacrifice. I sat frozen. Her words didn't cut with cruelty, but with the casualness of someone stating the obvious, as if my effort was community property to be handed out. Why would you say that? I asked slowly. Because Ryan needs a stable start. You're already doing fine. And since you don't have a family yet, being alone can be lonely. That word fine echoed in my head. For years, I'd been the one working, sending money home each month, paying dad's back treatment, buying mom a new art set when she said she couldn't afford paints. I never complained, never kept score. Yet somehow, all of that earned me the label doesn't need care. After that day, I didn't reply when mom sent photos of new furniture suitable for Ryan's family later. I ignored dad's request for the floor plan to see about expanding the space. I began to feel like a stranger in my own home, as if someone was slowly moving their things in without asking. Some nights, I lay staring at the ceiling, wondering, if I don't stop this, will I wake one morning to find my name gone from the deed? I said nothing to them. No anger, no arguments. I did just one thing. I scheduled a meeting with the company's real estate attorney. I asked how to secure ownership, asked about shell companies, about forming an LLC to hold the property while keeping full control. He looked surprised. I knew so much detail but didn't question me. He just handed me a packet and said, "If you're serious, we can finalize within 2 weeks." I signed, not because I thought my parents would actually strip me of my home, but because I understood how they thought. They never believed I needed to keep anything for myself. And they never believed my silence meant I was calculating. I transferred the ownership of the house into an LLC under my name. The address was still mine, I still lived there, but if anyone tried to interfere, they would face a legal entity, not a daughter who had always been patient. And I waited. Not for revenge, but to see just how far they were willing to push me away from what I had built with my own hands. One Friday evening, I left the office later than usual. The past month's project had drained nearly all my time, leaving me with nothing but my team and Zoom meetings stretching until 8 p.m. All I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, pour a glass of red wine, and sink into the armchair by the window, where the streetlight cast just enough glow for me to finish a half-read novel. Driving down the tree-lined street, I slowed near my driveway. The first feeling when I saw Ryan's car parked right at the door was confusion. The next, lasting through the whole drive-in, was unease. I climbed the steps, purse in hand, ready to fit the key into the lock, then realized the door wasn't locked. My heart pounded. I pushed the door open. Music pulsed from the living room, mixed with loud laughter, the smell of beer and roasted chicken, and flashing light from LED strips I'd never installed. I froze. 6 or 7 people crowded inside, most of them strangers. A group huddled in the kitchen, another jammed onto the sofa. A long-haired man poured vodka into a plastic cup and shoved the bottle into the freezer. On the wall behind the dining table hung a handmade sign. "Congratulations on Ryan's new home." I didn't feel anger right away. The shock was too heavy, numbing me for a few seconds. Then I saw Ryan. He had his arm around a platinum blonde, laughing with friends, pointing toward the painting above the fireplace, my mother's painting. "This is the family's artistic heritage," Ryan announced. Then he added, "Mom and Dad bought me this house so I could settle down. Since I couldn't afford it, they put it in their name for me." I stopped listening. I walked into the middle of the room, scanning faces as silence slowly fell. Ryan turned, his grin stiffening when he saw me. "Charlotte, I thought you were staying late at the office." "So did I said evenly, until I remembered I'd left my laptop at home. The air tightened. The blonde slipped her hand from Ryan's shoulder. "This is your house?" she asked. I didn't answer her. I looked straight at Ryan. "How did you get in?" He licked his lips, avoiding my eyes. Spare key. Maybe Mom still had one. I cut him off. The spare key was in a wooden box on the office bookshelf. You dug it out. You're blowing this way out of proportion. Ryan shrugged, his voice sliding into that familiar mix of excuse and defiance. You've got 2 empty rooms. I just used the space. It's not a big deal. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the plug on the Bluetooth speaker, and shut the music off. Silence blanketed the house. Everyone out, I said, eyes sweeping the crowd. Now. Some mumbled apologies, others grabbed coats quickly. Someone whispered, "No one told us it wasn't his place." Ryan followed as I opened the front door. "What are you doing? Embarrassing me in front of my friends?" I stood still, meeting his eyes. "You spun a story that Mom and Dad bought you this house, dragged strangers in, drank, ate, trashed the kitchen I clean every morning, and you think I'm supposed to save face for you? You're selfish," Ryan hissed. "Always acting like you're better. I just wanted one chance to live like a normal person." I let out a quiet laugh, unmoved. Normal people don't break into someone's home and claim it as their own. Ryan stormed off to his car. I didn't stop him. That night, I wiped beer from the wood table, gathered plastic cups scattered across the floor, and scrubbed dishes piled in the sink. My feet ached, but my mind was unnervingly clear. I knew this wouldn't end with an apology or a few silent days. I called my mother. She answered on the 4th ring. "Charlotte, is something wrong?" "I just want to ask." I kept my voice steady. "Did you tell anyone that you and Dad bought this house for Ryan?" Silence hung a few beats. "Well, maybe I mentioned it to Aunt Claire, just in passing. Family talk, no one takes it seriously." "I take it seriously," I replied, "because people believe it. Charlotte, you have 2 spare rooms. Ryan needs stability. Can't you share a little?" I leaned back in my chair, the soft yellow kitchen light glowing on the ceiling. "Did you ever ask what I need?" She didn't answer. I hung up. I realized kindness had been treated as a standing debt, something others could name, calculate, and spend whenever they pleased. I looked around my quiet home, each item carefully chosen, every corner wiped clean, every color reflecting the parts of myself I'd fought to keep. They thought I was weak because I didn't react. They thought I was easy to control because I didn't argue. They didn't understand that every silence was a step back to watch, to prepare. And when necessary, I wouldn't let anyone touch what was mine without paying the price. 1. Sunday afternoon, I went to my mother's house as planned. She said she'd learned a new lasagna recipe from the neighbor and wanted me to try it. I wasn't eager for family dinner after what had happened, but I went anyway out of courtesy and to keep enough contact to avoid unnecessary tension. I arrived a little early, thinking I'd help set the table and slip out quickly if things grew heavy. But as I opened the gate, I didn't hear chatter from the living room. Instead, voices echoed from my father's old study, where Mom kept a printer and filing cabinet. I was about to call out, then froze at her voice, soft but distinct. "If we just forge the signature, Charlotte will never know. The house has been steady under her name for months. Transferring now makes sense." I stood still, outside the cracked door. Ryan's voice followed. "Urgent. I need the loan soon, Mom. They won't wait. If I have the deed in my name, the bank will approve right away." My mother sighed. "Your father's still worried Charlotte will catch on. But I think if we match her handwriting and run it through a notary proxy, it won't be noticed. She doesn't care. She lives alone. She's busy. I'll use the house for a while, and she'll get over it." My grip tightened on the doorknob, blood draining to my fingertips. Not because they thought they could trick me, but because of how naturally they spoke, as if stealing my work was just another step in Ryan's career. I stepped back silently, heart pounding in my ears. I turned and walked quickly to my car. I couldn't stay another minute. That night, I sat at my desk, pulling out the legal folder my lawyer had given me when I created the LLC for the house. I reviewed every clause, every signature, every binding regulation, legal paperwork, real signatures, notarized, witnessed, each line a barricade against what I had just heard. From another drawer, I pulled old bank statements from college. I had kept them out of habit, not purpose. Now they were proof. During my sophomore year, nearly $8,000 I'd saved from part-time jobs, money I'd planned to use for a used car, vanished from my account without warning. Mom once said the card had malfunctioned, and naive as I was, I believed her. Later, I learned they'd used a secondary card to pull the money because Ryan had racked up credit card debt after dropping out. I stayed silent then. I was drowning in thesis deadlines, late-night shifts, waiting tables, mornings collapsing over textbooks. I didn't have the strength to fight my own family. Now it was repeating. But I was no longer the same. The next morning, I got to the office early and asked my assistant to print a notarized copy of the house file and LLC ownership records. I sealed them in a hard envelope, initialed every page, then mailed a copy to myself as a legal safeguard. At noon, I called my lawyer. Andrew, I need to confirm if anyone tries to forge my signature or transfer documents. The company has the right to file a civil lawsuit and report forgery to the prosecutor's office, correct? He paused a moment, then answered firmly, correct. You're not only the LLC's owner, but also its sole manager. Any transfer without your signature is void. I leaned back, closing my eyes. I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or heartbroken. What spread inside wasn't fear of losing assets, but the undeniable truth. I had never really had a home in the truest sense. That night, I got a text from Ryan. What are you doing with the house papers? Mom said not to mess with them until it's all taken care of. I didn't answer. I owed them no explanation. Less than an hour later, Mom called. Charlotte, I heard you sent something to a lawyer. Are you trying to turn a small issue into a big deal? I kept my voice steady. A small issue is when someone asks permission. This is forgery. This is fraud. You! I think I'd do that to you? I'm protecting what I built. And if you or anyone else crosses that line, I won't bend. Silence. Then her voice softened, the same softness that had made me cave so many times before. I just want the best for Ryan. He's never had the same opportunities you've had. I stared at the ceiling, shadows cast by the kitchen light stretching across the wall. Because you've taken mine to give to him, Mom. I didn't wait for her response. I ended the call quietly. No anger, no tears. I didn't need them to understand. I just needed them to stop. And if they didn't, I was ready to fight to the end. I began acting as if nothing had happened. Every harsh response, every question I sealed inside. Not because I was weak, but because I realized the best way to expose someone pretending to be innocent is to let them feel confident enough to push their luck. A few days later, I sent Mom a short text. I've thought it over. If Ryan truly wants stability, he can stay in one of the guest rooms for a while. But he has to respect my space. It took less than 10 minutes for her to call back, voice light as silk but brimming with excitement. Charlotte, I'm so glad you've reconsidered. Family is about sharing, sweetheart. I nodded, hand resting on the folder of documents I'd already prepared. Ryan moved in on a Tuesday afternoon carrying exactly 3 bags, a backpack, a duffel of gym clothes, and a box with his gaming console. No real luggage, no books, no resumes. Just someone trying his luck in someone else's space. I gave him keys to the front door and the guest room. I didn't mention the LLC. I didn't say every transfer required the company's approval. I let him believe he had the upper hand. All you need to do is take care of the place, keep it tidy, And don't bring strangers over without asking first, I said, laying fresh sheets on the bed. Ryan clapped my shoulder. Don't worry, I won't let you down. I smiled faintly. I hope so. The first week passed quietly. Ryan was barely around during the day. I assumed he was out with friends or hanging at cafes with strong Wi-Fi. At night, I heard the click of keys and his laughter drifting from his room, mixed with game noises and financial podcasts. Nobody mentioned jobs or applications. By the end of week 2, I saw Mom post a photo on Facebook. Ryan stood at my front door holding a folder, dressed in a white button-down, grinning confidently. The caption read, "My son's new beginning, everything is falling into place. Thanks for the quiet support." I didn't comment. I didn't react. I just saved the photo. Every public trace was another piece for the board I was setting. On Monday morning, I forgot a folder on the kitchen table, deliberately cracked open to reveal the bold headline. Proposal to amend usage rights of Bellevue Property, LLC. I left early for work, scribbling a note. Ryan, don't touch. Company document. When I came home that evening, the folder had been moved. A damp tea stain smudged the corner. A few days later, Ryan brought it up. Do you think if I had part of the house under my name, my loan application would go smoother? I looked up from my laptop, pretending to think. Are you talking about that cafe startup you mentioned? Yeah, you remembered, Ryan winked. Some of my friends say all I need is collateral. I don't want to bother you. If you're okay, maybe I could talk with Mom and Dad about co-ownership, just to make everything official. I closed the laptop slowly. Property is serious business. It has to go through proper channels. Besides, this house belongs to an LLC. It can't just be split into personal names. Ryan frowned, though he kept his tone light. But you're the LLC owner. If you agree, you could authorize me, right? I didn't answer right away. I studied him. He still wore that confident look, the kind of confidence born from always being indulged, from never expecting anyone to tell him no. I'll think about it, I said, stretching out the pause. But everything has to be on paper. That night, I received a strange email from a freshly created account. The content was simple but clear, a request for legal information about ownership and transfer rights for the Bellevue house. It had been sent to my company inbox. Even stranger, the sender used a fake name but left an electronic signature hidden in the metadata, a rookie mistake. I chuckled. I forwarded it to my lawyer, attaching a screenshot of Mom's Facebook post about Ryan's new beginning, along with an audio clip I'd recorded from Ryan's late-night phone call, picked up by the tiny mic hidden in my air purifier. In the recording, Ryan's voice was clear. She still doesn't know. Once I sort the papers, I can get the loan quick. I just need a copy of her company files from her desk. No need for my words. No accusations. Just his own voice tying the knot. I filed all of it into the legal protection case, instructing the law firm to issue warnings to any financial institutions involved. The property was legally non-transferable, and any fraudulent attempt would be prosecuted. I didn't send that warning to my family. I didn't have to. I just had to let them think they'd won, then let them pull the curtain down themselves. I still don't know how they dared to pick my house as Ryan's birthday venue, but the invitations went out casually, as if I had no say. Mom called a few days before, sweet as honey, as though there'd never been tension between us. Charlotte, this weekend is Ryan's birthday. We thought we'd have a little gathering. Aunt Linda, Uncle Eric, and Joe's whole family will be here. It's been so long since we all came together. I sat in my office, listening, feeling like a guest star in my own life. Where? I asked, though I already knew. At your place, of course. Plenty of room, the backyard is perfect, and those string lights you hung look so cozy. She said it like the house was communal property, as if I was just staying there, not the one who signed, paid, and sweated through every mortgage payment for over 2 years. I nodded, keeping my tone flat. I can make it work. That morning, I woke early. I hadn't prepared for a party. I had prepared for a performance that would change everything. I checked the hidden camera tucked inside the picture frame facing the dining table, checked the audio recorders placed in the planters near the backyard, where private conversations were bound to happen. Everything worked perfectly. I wore a simple dark blue dress, tied my hair back, no makeup. I wanted to fade into the background, the less attention, the better I could watch. By 11 a.m., guests poured in. Cars lined the street. Laughter, chairs scraping. The smell of barbecue filled the backyard. Mom had everyone bring homemade dishes. My aunt's laughter rang from the kitchen to the porch, calling me the generous young hostess. I smiled lightly, saying nothing. Ryan arrived late, as always. He wore a pale blue shirt, hair slicked, carrying flowers for Mom. When he saw me, he just nodded politely, like I was a neighbor. The party was more elaborate than I imagined. A "Happy Birthday Ryan" banner stretched across the fence. The table was covered with framed photos of Ryan from childhood to now. A slideshow ran on a mini projector Mom had brought, casting his pictures onto a white curtain. And then came the climax. Mom stood in the backyard, microphone in hand, tapping lightly for attention. Conversations faded. All eyes turned to her. "Today isn't just Ryan's birthday," she began, voice thick with emotion. "It's also a new milestone in our son's life." Dad stood beside her, resting a hand on her shoulder. He said nothing, just nodded along. "We're proud to announce, from today, this house, this warm home officially belongs to Ryan. This is our gift to our son, to help him start fresh, to build his future on solid ground." Applause erupted. A few gasps of surprise. And then all the eyes turned toward me, standing by the kitchen door. I didn't speak, I only lifted my chin slightly, lips curling as though I couldn't believe what I'd heard. Inside, my heart beat slowly, steadily, as though every piece was sliding into the groove I had laid. Ryan stepped forward, grinning wide. "Thank you, Mom and Dad. Thank you, everyone. I couldn't do this without you. I promise I won't let anyone down." Mom pulled a stack of papers from her purse. "Here is the signed contract. We wanted you to have ownership as soon as possible so you can move forward with your plans." She handed the papers to Ryan as the applause swelled again. He raised them high, like a champion. I stepped forward, voice calm but carrying across the yard. "May I see a copy of that contract?" The crowd fell silent. Ryan turned, smile frozen. What do you mean?" I extended my hand. "You just announced to the family that this house was transferred, so you won't mind if the person living here reviews the paperwork." Mom stepped in quickly, voice strained. "Charlotte, this is a celebration. Don't ruin the moment." I looked at her. "If this is Ryan's house, then I'm a guest. And a guest should know who the host island." Ryan handed me the papers. I skimmed them, my name, forged signature, the date off by a week. An outdated form, no corporate stamp. I walked inside, opened the cabinet, and pulled out a USB drive I'd prepared. I slid it into the projector. The screen in the yard shifted, from photos of Ryan to footage from the hidden camera I had placed behind the painting. The video was crystal clear, my mother and Ryan talking in the study. The resolution was sharp enough to read every line on the forged contract laid out on the desk. The crowd froze. My mother's voice echoed in the recording. "As long as Charlotte doesn't know, everything is legal." I said nothing more. I pulled the USB from the projector, shut it down, and turned back toward the family, still standing stiff as statues. Thank you all for coming today. I hope this party leaves a memory you won't forget. I walked back inside. Behind me, the music had stopped, the clinking of glasses gone. Only silence remained, heavy as stone, cold as the first winter wind seeping through an open door. On Monday morning, I walked into Andrew's office under a light drizzle, raindrops sliding down the windows like thoughts that refused to stop. He rose when I entered, shaking my hand firmly but with deliberate restraint. "I've reviewed the entire video," he said once we Saturday, "and the supporting documents, forged signatures, incorrect dates, and the audio recordings. Enough to press charges for attempted property theft by forgery." I nodded. "I don't want to make a spectacle, Andrew, but I can't let them continue damaging my name and my property like this." His eyes softened. "You don't need to worry. The case is straightforward. You have the right to file a civil lawsuit and request a protective order for the asset under the company. I'll file today." 3 days later, subpoenas were delivered to my parents' address, naming Richard and Elaine Whitmore and Ryan Whitmore for their involvement in forging real estate documents. I didn't call ahead. I let the law run its course. I owed them no explanations, no apologies for my clarity. That evening, my mother called. I let the phone ring out. The next day, she left a voicemail nearly 2 minutes long, her voice breaking in the middle but never once saying the word sorry. Only the same refrains. "Why did you let this go so far? We're family. I just wanted what's best for everyone." I deleted it as soon as I finished listening, then turned back to my preparations for the bank meeting. I hadn't realized things were even worse than I thought. That weekend, I received a call from the legal department of a regional bank. The officer's tone was tense. "Miss Charlotte Whitmore?" "Yes, this is she. We're verifying a loan application secured by the property at your Bellevue address. The file includes your signature as guarantor." I sat up straight. I've never signed any guarantee for anyone. "So you do not confirm a loan of $150,000 under Ryan Whitmore's name, supported by a property transfer and your co-signature?" I drew in a deep breath. "Number, that house is owned through an LLC and I am the sole manager. Any transfer not approved by the company is fraudulent." There was silence on the other end. "Then, in that case, we'll have to initiate foreclosure proceedings against Ryan Whitmore due to evidence of credit fraud. Can you provide the legal ownership documents?" I sent them that same day, along with notarized confirmation from Andrew and the original filings proving the property belonged to the LLC. 3 days later, the bank escalated the case to the district prosecutor. What had begun as a family dispute had now become financial forgery with criminal implications. I sat in my office as the late light filtered through the window, glancing at the painting my mother had once done, still hanging by the bookshelf. Its colors had faded over the years. I hadn't taken it down not because I cherished it, but because it reminded me of what love had been and what it had become. Andrew informed me the first hearing was scheduled for early next month. The defense would have their chance, but the evidence was overwhelming: forged documents, recorded conversations, public declarations at the party, and the fraudulent loan guarantee under my name. Andrew texted me after leaving the bank meeting. Ryan used the forged documents in his loan application. His parents co-signed as guarantors. The bank is demanding full repayment. I felt no satisfaction. No punishment could bring peace when the people held accountable were the same ones who once called me daughter, sister. But the sense of justice, that my effort was legally protected, that the law acknowledged my fight, brought me a steadier peace than any late apology ever could. That afternoon, another call came, a blocked number. I almost ignored it, but instinct told me to listen. "Charlotte." My father's voice came after a few seconds of silence. No longer booming, no familiar sharpness, just a heavy sound as though he spoke across a chasm he'd helped create. This has gone too far. I said nothing. Can you stop this? Our family doesn't deserve to be shamed like this. I leaned back, gazing out the window. The sun was sinking behind the rooftops. Its last light caught the edge of my porch, my house, guarded with everything I had, not to strike back, but to preserve dignity against what they called family duty. My voice was steady. Family is not an excuse for betrayal. I ended the call. I didn't wait for more. I stepped out onto the balcony, the early spring breeze carrying the faint scent of wildflowers. I had come farther than I ever imagined, and this time I was walking not for anyone else, just for myself. And that was enough. The courtroom that morning was colder than I expected. Not from the air conditioning, but from the tension hanging over every bench, every breath. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside Andrew, my hand resting on the thick stack of documents. Across from us sat the defendants, my father, my mother, and Ryan, the three people I once called family. Mom wore a gray cardigan buttoned to her neck, as if to project formality. Dad sat with fingers laced, shoulders stooped, avoiding my gaze. Ryan still looked confident, but something in his eyes had dimmed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by fear he couldn't hide. The judge, a woman in her 50s, had a stern but not unkind face. She reviewed the submissions carefully, turning each page with the patience of someone long familiar with such cases, yet attentive enough to weigh every word. Andrew began. His voice was clear, firm, but controlled. Your Honor, my client, Miss Charlotte Whitmore, is the sole manager and owner of Bellevue Property, LLC. The house in question has never been personal property, but was acquired under the company from the beginning. The defendants, specifically Mr. Ryan Whitmore, with the assistance of Richard and Elaine Whitmore, committed systemic fraud by attempting to use forged documents for credit. Any transfer lacking legal authorization from the LLC is void. He opened the file, laying it before the judge. She studied the notarized seals and LLC documentation carefully. Andrew continued. We have also submitted video evidence capturing a conversation between Elaine Whitmore and Ryan Whitmore discussing the forgery of my client's signature. Additionally, my client has provided audio confirming their intent to use company property as collateral for a $150,000 loan, which the bank is now demanding be repaid. The atmosphere thickened. I didn't turn to look at them. I listened to Andrew's words, each one a steady knock against the silence I had carried for years. The defense lawyer, a gray-haired man with a weary face, rose. His voice was gentler but edged with unease. Your Honor, the defense does not deny the documents. However, we ask the court to consider the family context. Miss Whitmore allowed her brother to use the house, and in that environment, misunderstandings about usage and ownership may have arisen. This was not organized fraud, but a misinterpretation within the family. He paused, then added, Miss Whitmore is successful and independent, but perhaps distant. Her parents, Richard and Elaine Whitmore, acted under emotional strain, trying to help their son through unemployment. Their intentions were not malicious, they simply sought to give him a chance. I tilted my head, finally glancing at them. My mother's hands were clenched in her lap. My father stared only at the judge. Ryan, for the first time, couldn't lift his head. The judge placed her hands on the bench, eyes sweeping both sides. Thank you, but we are not here to weigh family feelings. This is a civil proceeding with potential criminal implications. The defendant's use of forged documents to secure a loan is a serious matter. Even among family, the law must be respected. She paused, her gaze settling on me. Miss Charlotte, would you like to say anything before I give a preliminary ruling? I rose and walked slowly to the podium. My voice wasn't loud, but each word was clear. I'm not standing here for revenge. I never wanted to bring my parents and my brother to court, but I had to protect what I built. For so long, I was treated like the extra in my own family. Every achievement of mine was taken for granted, while every failure of my brothers was excused and blamed on circumstances. I looked at them, my expression no longer sad, only carrying a silence that had ripened. I once let them take my tuition money for my brother. I once stayed quiet when they denied my ownership of my own property, turning it into someone else's tool. But I am not silent anymore, not because I don't love them, but because I've learned love cannot exist without respect. The judge nodded slowly. She wrote something down, then looked up. The court recognizes this as property fraud. I am issuing an order suspending all transactions related to the house in question and requiring the defendants to repay the loan or face potential criminal investigation under the Cation law. The words rang like a bell in an empty church. Ryan stared at me, his eyes stripped of anger or arrogance, only real panic left. My mother cried, not with sound, but with tears, tracing down lines etched deep by age. My father said nothing, but his knuckles whitened as his hands clenched tight. I returned to my seat, drawing in a deep breath. The room was the same high ceiling, fluorescent lights, the tapping of pens against wood, but I felt different inside. I was no longer the daughter hiding behind curtains when relatives came, giving up my room because he needs space to study, skipping breakfast to afford birthday gifts for my parents. I was no longer the only one told to sacrifice because you're stronger. And if justice was the only thing that could make them listen, then I chose to stand with it. Not out of bitterness, but because silence too long convinces people there are no boundaries. That afternoon, after court, I slipped out the side door. Soft sunlight spilled across gray stone steps, wind brushing the hem of my coat. I didn't look back. I didn't need to see the three figures left standing in the main hall, whether frozen in shock, shame, or simply not knowing where to step next. My shoes echoed against the cold tile, each step a quiet mark laid down over years of sharp turns I had endured with them, sweet deceptions, empty promises, half-hearted hugs when I needed a real embrace. I had just opened my car door when Ryan called out. His voice was raw, as if forced into shape all afternoon. "Can we talk for a minute?" I leaned against the car, looking straight at the brother who had never seemed to grow up. Ryan walked closer, his shoulders sagging, eyes red. No arrogance, no excuses, no victim act this time. "You're better than me, and I never accepted that," he whispered. "I was stupid. I thought you were too tough to be hurt by anything, but I pushed everything too far." I stayed silent. No pity, no dismissal. Just watching. He swallowed hard. "I won't ask for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But if there's any way to make amends, I want to start over." I nodded slightly. "You can." His eyes flickered with surprise. Before he could speak again, I pulled a small set of keys and a slim folder from my bag, placing them in his hand. "This apartment's in Rainier Valley, 3rd floor. Small but livable. Near a bus stop, about a 5-minute walk from the job center. Rent's paid for 6 months. If you really want a fresh start, this is the chance you've been demanding all your life." Ryan opened the folder, hands trembling. He recognized the address instantly. I wasn't surprised he'd once scoffed at that neighborhood as cramped, old, and worthless. "I bought it 3 months ago," I said evenly. "Originally planned to rent it out, but now I see it suits you better." Ryan looked up, lips trembling. "And the big house?" he asked, as if clinging to a faint hope. I shook my head. "Never. That's my work. Mine alone." He lowered his head. For so long, I thought he might never look up again. "Thank you," he muttered. "I won't let you down again." I gave no reply. I didn't need promises. I needed action, something he had treated as an abstract idea for years. We said nothing more. I got into the car, closing the door. Ryan stayed on the sidewalk, holding the keys and folder, as if clutching a part of himself long lost. 2 days later, my parents asked to meet at a small cafe near Seward Park. I agreed. Not to hear excuses, but to end what hung unspoken between us. They arrived before me, seated by the window. Mom wore a beige cardigan, her hair tied back, thinner than I remembered. Dad looked unmistakably older, stripped of the sternness he once used to lecture me about duty and responsibility. I sat, nodding briefly. Mom spoke first. "Charlotte, we've thought a lot, and I'm sorry for everything." I didn't interrupt. I let her continue. "I shouldn't have left you to fight alone. I favored Ryan, not because I didn't love you, but because I believed you didn't need anyone." Dad sighed, his voice hoarse. "I was wrong to think silence was fairness. Every time you succeeded, I used it as a reason to do less for you. But I forgot everyone needs protection." I looked at them, the people who had hurt me more than anyone else could. They sat stripped of pride, their defenses gone. "I put the house under an LLC to protect myself," I said slowly. "Not to fight you. But I couldn't live in a home that always felt like someone else's prize." Mom reached out, then stopped midair. "Can we start over?" I glanced outside. A child tossed a leaf into the air, laughing as if freedom itself was his to hold. It lightened me. "I'm not closing the door," I answered. "But I'm not opening it wide either. We can rebuild if every brick is honesty, not debt or schemes." Mom cried. But for the first time, I saw her cry, because she understood. Not tears of blame or manipulation, just quiet cleansing. We sat in silence. For once, it wasn't cold. I felt part of a real conversation, not the girl bowing her head, shrinking to preserve the illusion of family. Things might never be the same, but maybe they didn't need to be. 6 months later, I sat in my new office on the 19th floor. The plaque on the door gleamed, Charlotte Whitmore, Executive Vice President of Strategy and Partnerships. I remembered when the CEO called me in early spring. He said the company needed someone not only with analysis, but with resolve in the hardest situations. "I used to think you were cold," he admitted bluntly. "But now I see, you're not cold, you're resilient." I only nodded. Resilience doesn't need validation. It's learned when you must hold your worth in a house where your voice is treated as excess. The house I fought to protect now served as the company's strategic guest venue. No one could have guessed that a warm Bellevue home would host multi-million-dollar deals with international partners. The living room stayed the same in structure, but I added a wall-mounted wine rack and a walnut coffee table. The art was new, black and white photos I'd taken on business trips. Nothing inherited, nothing claimed by anyone but me. Visitors often assumed it was a model home staged by the firm. I never rushed to correct them. I just smiled when they praised its balance, its quiet steadiness. Ryan now worked as an assistant warehouse supervisor for a delivery company, modest pay, but steady. He repaid his loan installments each month. No one mentioned that year anymore. Once he sent me a short text. "I don't dream of your house anymore. I'm trying to build one of my own." I didn't reply immediately. Days later, I answered with one line, "Good. Don't build on illusions." My parents still lived in the old house. They no longer spoke of Ryan's fresh start at family gatherings. They didn't ask, "When will you marry?" or "Aren't you lonely?" Maybe they had learned to respect choices even when they weren't theirs to make. Our relationship never returned to what it was. But I understood. Not everything needs to return to be called healed. Sometimes distance itself is protection. And keeping a safe distance, that too is love, matured. Tonight, I stood alone on the 19th floor balcony, watching the city lights flicker alive. They stretched like veins, connecting hills to neighborhoods, strangers' rooftops to my own window. The wind slipped through my sleeves, carrying the scent of wet grass and damp wood from the park beyond. I gripped the railing, steady, breathing deep. Behind me lay stacks of files, a darkened screen, and a dream that had taken shape not in anyone else's applause, but in the quiet resolve of my own. I once thought the house was a reward, believed titles, salary, or recognition were proof I had chosen right. I was wrong. Success for me is not wealth or rank, it is boundaries. It's the moment I looked those who dismissed me in the eye and said, "Number," it's the line I drew around my kindness. It's standing tall not because someone knocked me down, but because I chose not to bend anymore. I touched the cold glass of the balcony door smooth, solid, like the feeling of stepping out of a storm and realizing you're still whole. I whispered, unsure if to myself or to the shadows of my past. Success isn't the house I own, it's the boundary I built. And in that moment, I understood true love never means being used. So what do you think of my story? Of a woman betrayed by her own family who chose not hatred or harsh revenge, but the strength to set boundaries, protect her dignity, and rebuild from the pieces. I don't tell this for pity. I tell it because I know many out there have lived the same silent sacrifices, endless giving, only to be called too much, cold, or ungrateful when they finally stand for justice. So what about you? Have you ever been used under the name of family? Have you dared to say, enough, and begin rewriting your life? Leave your thoughts in the comments because maybe your story can help someone else find themselves again. And if this story touched a memory or stirred your heart, don't forget to follow the channel to stay with me for the next one's real stories, full of tears, but also full of the strength each of us carries inside. Because family isn't just blood real, family is where respect lives, kindness exists, and no one must trade dignity for love.